We are now officially live. Soti and welcome everyone. This is the weekly Dhamma group with the Sirimangalo community, where we are joined with Venerable Yuttadhammo, who is actually at the Sirimangalo Center right now in Sri Lanka. Right now we are currently studying the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta's commentary by the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. As a tradition, we start off by taking the 5 precepts together before every session. It's a wholesome act that we do to remind us of the path and keep us grounded in moral conduct and action. And taking the precepts was something that was done during the Buddha's time, and we still carry that tradition now. Edith said she would like to lead the precepts today for us, so I'll let her begin when she's ready. Thank you, Edith.
Thank you. Ahang Bante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami. Dutiyampi Ahang Bante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami. Tatiyampi Ahang Bante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Isarnagamanang nititang.
Bhante.
Parnatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinna dana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Atinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Amesu micchācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu Chachara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Surameraya majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura Miraya Majja Madhatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena sugating yanti silena bhoga sampada silena nibbutting yanti tasma silang visodhati.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu.
So we will now continue our study and reading of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta commentary. And we are at PDF page 155, which is the physical page 145. Again, this is the commentary by the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. We're at the title of Sensual Craving. And this topic we're on is actually about sensual craving too. And we're starting off with the line of these three types. And just remember to leave some time after each paragraph in case Venerable wants to share any insight, if there's questions. And for today, Edit, you'll be the first one on the reading order list. Can you please start our reading off today, please?
I am trying to find where that is. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Austin, would you be ready to start for us then?
No, I am not seeing it on the main screen. I was dependent on that myself. I have not opened the PDF.
I'm okay now. Is it the so 145, page 145, and sensual craving, right?
Yes, and Martin just pulled it up too, and in case anybody
All
in
right.
Discord wants to see it now.
How are you
craving.
determining the order of readers?
I'm just clicking in the core group and whoever is in alphabetical order, and it's posted in the chat.
Okay, great.
Sensual craving. One of these three types, sensual craving, is craving for pleasurable sense objects, whether belonging to oneself or to others. The craving that arises on seeing a beautiful sight is sensual craving. Here, object of sight relates not only to appearance, color, etc., but to the whole form or body of a man or woman, which serves as the basis of the sight, the clothes worn, and other associated objects. Likewise, pleasurable sounds and sound-producing objects, delightful odors and their source, delicious taste and food producing the taste, men and women who prepare and serve delicious food, tactile sensations of rapture, and objects producing such sensations, all of these constitute objects of pleasure, and craving for them is sensual craving. In short, desire for any pleasurable sense object is sensual craving.
So, a small recap then. We are on the second noble truth. Remember, this is the first discourse of the Buddha, and the core of it is about the Four Noble Truths. So at this point, he's just talking about what the Buddha is talking about. What are the Four Noble Truths? So he gives a definition of truth of suffering. And now the second truth is the truth of the origination of, or the origin of suffering. And the origin of suffering is tanha, or thirst, craving. And there are three kinds of tanha. And so this section is now going to, we've already talked about how craving leads to becoming or leads to suffering. But now we're talking about what are specifically the three types of craving. So this is the first.
Yes. Wishing to become a human being, a celestial being, wishing to be born a man or a woman, longing to enjoy sensual pleasures as a human being, as a celestial being, as a man or a woman, all of these cravings are also sensual craving. Therefore, we say that taking delight in any pleasurable thought or object is sensual craving.
On seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, or touching a sense object, if one considers it to be pleasant, a liking is at once developed for it. Thinking it to be pleasant amounts to ignorance, avijja, which conceals the true nature of the sense object and gives rise to false views about it. Ignorance regards what is transitory as permanent. Could you please move up a little bit? Yeah, thank you. Permanent, it takes what is suffering. Because of incessant arising and vanishing to be pleasant, it takes mere physical and mental phenomena which are neither a soul or a living entity, to be a soul or living entity, and it considers one's own body or one's bodies, which are repulsive and disgusting, as beautiful and pleasing.
So the important point here is that the mechanics of suffering occur at each moment of experience. So when we say suffering and then the cause of suffering, there's potential for it to be taken as I am suffering and my craving is a cause for suffering, and I crave food, or I crave romance, or I crave rebirth, or I crave heaven or something like that. To see it all conceptually in this way, and then you say, well, how do I deal with my craving? I have to go to rehab, or I have to see a therapist, or I have to practice Buddhist meditation. And when I walk so many hours and sit, so see, it's easy to create this conceptual narrative about suffering, and to miss the fact that this is actually happening at every single moment of experience, and there really is no I involved. There's no being or objects that are a being. Like the food is not real, the romantic partner is not. It's not what's actually happening. It's not actually where the suffering is being caused. The suffering is being caused at every moment of seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and feeling and thinking. And in the case of this first one, the first 5, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling. At the moment when any of these arises, there's the moment of experiencing, and then the next moment there will be registering and judging, analyzing, judging, and then liking or disliking or so on. And so it helps you understand the way that mindfulness works, or how mindfulness affects change. Because at the moment of seeing, when one notes seeing, one changes that moment from a moment of, or changes that process, changes the moment of judging to a moment of clear seeing, or accurate judgment. Accurate judgment in the sense that, what is this? Good, bad, is that? No, this is seeing. When you judge seeing as seeing, that's the correct judgment. That's the perfect judgment. Not anything else. Not I see a cat, not this is good thing that I see, not I am the one seeing, nothing. Seeing is seeing. When you say to yourself, seeing, remind yourself in that way, you replace the other kinds of judgment with this correct judgment. It's happening at a momentary level, which is why we apply mindfulness again and again, which is why this activity of reminding yourself again and again is so important. It's important to understand that it's not about how many hours you practice or how many years you've been practicing, right? It's not the fact that you are a Buddhist or you call yourself a Buddhist meditator. It's about these moments that are happening right now.
Bante, if I may ask a question. So it says above that, at the moment of liking, there is wrong view about it, which is understandable. But then just to correlate with, they say that the third stage of enlightenment is where sensual pleasure is cut off. So the first 2 stages is where a wrong view is cut off. So the difference between that wrong view and this wrong view, if basically, is what I'm not getting.
So you don't need wrong view to have craving. But he's just talking general. Where does he talk about wrong view exactly?
I think above, was it above? Where am I? I'd seen it in the first paragraph.
I remember. I know he mentions it, but where exactly and in what context?
Can you go up a little bit on the? Sorry, Martin, or where was? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see wrong view. I think it's in the 3rd paragraph, isn't it?
Thinking it to be pleasant it amounts to ignorance, which conceals true nature of the sense object and gives rise to false views about it.
Yeah, but not for everyone. It gives rise to false views in ordinary people. But a Sotapanna won't give rise to wrong views. He's just talking in generalizations. So what you said is not correct. You suggested that he was saying there is wrong view when you like something. But that's not what he says, right?
Sorry, just to maybe drill down a little bit more, I mean, my understanding might not be so great, but at the moment of liking, at that moment, if there is no wrong view about the liking itself, then there should not be liking. Like basically, no avidya will be completely no wrong view.
No, but you're confusing things. Avidya is not wrong view. Avidya is ignorance. Sotapanna still has avidya.
Right.
They
Like.
don't have wrong view.
Mm.
So a good way to think of it is there are 3 levels of wrongness. There's wrong perception, wrong thought, and wrong view. Wrong perception is when you perceive something that is not worth liking. You perceive it as something worth liking. In other words, you like it. You see something and there's liking of it. Thinking, wrong thought is when you think, oh, that's beautiful, or that's attractive, or that's something worth liking. The thought arises. This thought can arise in a sotapanna, but wrong view is when you say, yes, that's true. When you don't think that, but when there is this belief, like you affirm that with yourself, because a sotapanna can think that and say, oh, listen to me thinking this is something that I used to think, but these thoughts are just residual. Sotapanna will be quick to even chastise themselves for their thoughts and say, oh wait, look at me having that thought. So a sotapanna, it can still give rise to wrong thought even, but not wrong view. So even their thoughts will be chastised. They will quickly see, oh, this thought arose and it's not correct. But they certainly can still perceive things as pleasant or unpleasant, as something worth liking, something not worth liking. Just perceive it that way. In other words, they see it and they like it, or they see it and they dislike it. And they can even think, oh, that's delicious, or that's beautiful. But then they won't affirm that. They won't say, yes, it's true. This thing is worth clinging to. That's the view, when you believe something that you think.
Right. Thank you, Bhante.
They're actually different. Sotapanna probably won't give rise to much thinking that's like that, but it's still possible because it's just a thought, right?
Regarding what is unpleasant to be pleasant, liking for it develops. Liking it and desiring it leads to craving, which drives one to perform activities to fulfill that craving. Such volitional activities are karma, sankhara, which are responsible for the formation of new mental and physical aggregates of a new existence. Thus, each instance of liking or desiring a sense object amounts to embarking on a new round of becoming.
So when he says new existence, that doesn't necessarily have to mean a new birth, like a new being, like after you die. As I mentioned, you can think of any kind of activity that is caused by craving as becoming. So you want something so much, you take a loan. A good example is a loan. You want a new car, so you take out a big loan. Well, that's a lot of new becoming. You've created something new. You have a romantic interest, so you get married or you get engaged or this, etc., etc. You have children. All of these things are becoming as a result of craving. Of course, the biggest one is that when you die, the craving, the things that you crave, the attachments that you have, it's not just the likes, but the craving for non-becoming as well. The things you're afraid of or dislike, or anything you attach to, good or bad, leads to a new life. And it can be a new life in hell, as an animal, as a ghost, or as a human, or in heaven, or as a Brahma even. As long as there's craving for something, there will be some sort of becoming.
Influenced by craving, karma-forming consciousness, otherwise called disease, thought, moment, impulsions, tenaciously clings to the karma, sign of karma or sign of destiny, the three signs that appear as death approaches. Because of this tenacious clinging to the objects seen at death's door, the moment after decease, consciousness vanishes. Rebirth linking consciousness arises, holding on to the last seen objects to give rise to a new birth. Hence, this craving is described as liable to give rise to new becoming. Craving for existence. According to the commentary, craving for existence, bhavathana, is the craving that is accompanied by eternalism, sasata ditti. Here, bhava means becoming or being. Hence, craving for existence is craving based on the belief in the permanence and stability of existence. Eternalism is the wrong view, believing that the soul or the living being does not disappear. Although the physical body perishes, the soul, the living entity, is thought not to be subject to dissolution. It enters into a new body and remains there. Even if the world crumbles and breaks up, it remains eternally and never perishes.
And so again, the idea here is that you want to become something means you believe you are something that can become something. So you are a soul, or etc. That it is you that will become, when in fact, the becoming in the future is actually not the you that is now. And the you that becomes in the future will just arise and cease as well. Which means there's no value in becoming this or becoming that. Not real, not what's really going on. The thing that's real is wholesome and unwholesome deeds. So as long as you cling to becoming something and then you're proud or happy when you become it, maybe you become famous, or you become powerful, or you become esteemed. No, none of these things have any value. But the good deeds that you've done to get there, the bad deeds that you've done to get there, oh, they have meaning, and they will be the true progenitor, the true cause of suffering and happiness and suffering.
Religious faiths outside of the Buddha's teaching mostly hold this view of eternalism. Some of them believe that after death, man remains permanently in heaven or suffers eternal damnation in hell according to God's wish. Others take the view that a being migrates from one existence to another according to karma and exists permanently. Again, others believe that a being exists eternally, changing from one life to another on a predetermined set course.
You can see the difference. If you believe that it's you that's going through all this, then it makes sense to try and get all these things for you. But if you don't have that sense, it just all falls apart. You think, I'll work towards this, but if you understand that it's just going to be more momentary existences, there's no working towards anything. There's only moments of existence. The idea of acquiring things or becoming things is just meaningless. real ambition killer. People who practice Buddhism become far less ambitious in a worldly sense. People sometimes ask, how could we function? How could the world function without ambition? No? People didn't do anything. What would happen to the world? But you can see from a worldly perspective, it would be it's pretty easy to understand how much better the world would be if people had less ambition, less drive. It's the most evil ambitions out there that are just that cause the most problem. Most intense ambitions, you could say. Even people who have good, potentially ostensibly good ambitions, they want to change the world for the better. They don't actually do the right thing by trying to make the world a better place. It's not how betterment comes about. If you're not making yourself a better person, you're not actually making the world a better place.
In short, any belief that holds the view that a soul or living entity moves on without dissolution to new existences is the wrong view of eternalism, sasata ditti. For instance, a bird on a tree flies away to another tree when the first tree falls down. When the second tree falls down again, it flies on to a third tree. Likewise, the soul, or living entity, on the dissolution of a physical body on which it depends, moves on to another body, itself remaining everlasting.
Just, if anyone is confused, he is not saying that's the way things are. He's offering an example of wrong view. That last statement is an example of wrong view. He is not saying that's the truth, which it sounds like. If you read that, you could quote Mahasi Sayadaw as saying that would be very, very bad and wrong. He's describing how people with wrong view think.
Craving accompanied by the wrong view of eternalism is called craving for existence, bhava-tanha. This craving takes delight in the view that the soul or living entity is permanent, enduring. This I, which has been in permanent existence since eternity, feels the sensations and will continue feeling them. Believing thus, one takes delight in every object seen, heard, touched, or known, and also in the objects that one hopes to enjoy in the future, wishing to enjoy a prosperous, happy life now and in the future. To be born in good, happy existence, to enjoy the prosperous life of human or celestial beings. Some wish to be born always as a man, others as a woman. All of these are craving for existence.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a gray area between them. You can want to be reborn as a man or a woman out of sensual desire. or you can want to be famous or become president or something. You want to become a millionaire because of the sensuality. But you can also want these things simply out of wanting to be them. You can have a craving for station, craving for the idea, I am this. I think, wow, what would it be to be the CEO or to be a general or to be a prime minister or a president, be the CEO of the company. So it's a mix, because sometimes you'll think, oh yeah, I'll have lots of money, I'll be able to get I'll get everything I want. That sensual craving, and so you do that, you become that, or you strive to become that out of a desire for sensuality. But there's also the feeling of the excitement of becoming that thing. You see this, people are excited to become Buddhist monks. They give meaning to the becoming of a Buddhist monk. A meditation teacher there was one point where I got the idea to give out certificates. The idea was that it would give people some kind of encouragement. And it backfired terribly, as people were much more interested in the certificates than in the actual practice or the learning. And they were very demanding about their certificates and stuff. I said, I don't have any certificates. I've been doing this for a long time and I don't have any certificates. But they wanted their certificates because it said they were something. But we stopped that. No more certificates.
Every time craving arises for the sense objects that are presently available, or for the present existence, or in looking forward to the existence one wishes to be in, because of this craving, a conditioning influence or potential power is being built up for the arising of a new life. This is why the Buddha taught, liable to give rise to new birth, Ponobhavika. I have summarized it thus: craving for existence with the idea that it is eternal is craving for existence.
And remember, Ponobhavika is part of the sutta when the Buddha describes tanha. Tatra tatra binandini, yayang tanhang ponobhavika, tatra binandini. Whatever tanha or thirst is ponobhavika, is liable to give rise to new becoming. Tatra tatra binandini, making one someone who desires this and that, here and there, wherever one arises. The tatra tatra binandini, remember we talked about how wherever you're born, you desire, you crave for the things that are in front of you. So you're born a dung beetle, you crave after dung and other dung beetles.
Craving for non-existence. In the term vibhava tanha, vibhava means non-becoming, non-being, annihilation of existence. Craving for the view that there is existence only while alive, that there is nothing after death, is craving for non-existence, vibhava tanha. This is the craving that is accompanied by the wrong view of annihilationism, Ucheda Diti, which maintains that nothing remains after death. There is complete annihilation. It is the doctrine taught by Ajita, the leader of a sect during the Buddha's lifetime. His teaching ran thus.
So it's not that the craving for non-existence is craving for the view. You don't crave for that view, but it's craving with that view, or craving that's dependent on that view. It's dependent on that view because, just like with Sasada Ditti, with Ucheda Ditti, Vibhava Tanha, you want something to disappear. That's only meaningful if there is a sense that things can go away. If there's a sense that you can keep things gone, like you can change and just get rid of something. And so the ultimate form of that is when you die, there's nothing, that you're able to get rid of everything. So people who commit suicide, this is definitely an example of Vibhava Tanha, because it's based on the belief that their craving, it's possible to fulfill their craving for annihilation. And it happens in more minor ways, of course. You want to get rid of someone. You don't want to have to see someone, or you want to get rid of an illness, or you want to get rid of a facial feature or a bodily feature. You want to lose weight, for example. You want to not be this or not be that. You wish you weren't ugly, or you wish you didn't have bad smell or bad breath or bad teeth. All of these things. And if someone is without this wrong view, it becomes meaningless, right? Because okay, I can be without these things, but for how long and to what end? If I'm like this now, it's always possible for me to be this again. It doesn't mean that you should never strive to get rid of anything, right? There are certain. It's possible to have the intention to get rid of something without having Vibhava Tanha. When you have a reason, so maybe you need good teeth for your job or something, or you need to lose weight for your job or this or that. There are reasons. And for meditation practice, of course, sometimes you need to work to overcome illness in order to be able to practice and that sort of thing. Sometimes you need to get rid of your worldly ties if you want to become a Buddhist meditator or a monk or something. That's not to say that striving to get rid of something or striving to become something, or that you should never strive to become a Buddhist or a monk or something. It's just to not have the craving that's associated with wrong view, the belief that somehow it has some meaning. Like if I become a monk, or if I get rid of this or get rid of that, that it has some, that it can be a goal in and of itself. The only thing that has any meaning is getting rid of craving. So the Buddha said, I am an annihilationist in one way, because I teach the annihilation of greed, anger, and delusion. I teach the annihilation of the cause of suffering and the annihilation of suffering.
An individual is made up of the four primary elements. When he dies, the earth element of his body goes into the mass of the earth element that exists in inanimate external bodies. It means the element of earth that manifested as hardness or coarseness, while in the living body merges with the inanimate external earth element, the earth element of the dead body. In time, it turns into earth, which is again converted into earth element in trees and plants, etc. The water element of the living body flows into inanimate mass of water. That is to say, the fluidity of the dead body becomes the moisture of the mass of water. The fire element of the living body merges with the mass of inanimate external heat, and the living air element flows into the mass of inanimate external air. All knowing faculties, sense organs, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, etc., move over into space. Those holding the annihilationist view do not recognize the separate existence of eye consciousness, ear consciousness, etc. They hold that the material forms of the sense organs, otherwise called the faculties themselves, see, hear, taste, touch, etc., and mind itself thinks. They explained the cessation of consciousness in terms of the 6 faculties of sense, which according to them disappear into space. Whether he is a fool or a wise man, when he dies, he completely disappears. Nothing is left after death. The fool does not suffer in a new existence for his past misdeeds. The wise man does not get a new existence in which he enjoys the fruits of his good karmas. After death, everything disappears.
This is especially, I mean, it's great that he quotes this view in its entirety, because this is, of course, very much in line with modern material scientific thinking. Right? It's sort of the default now in modern society that, of course, this is what everyone believes. When you die, there's nothing. From a materialist point of view, it seems perfectly logical. It seems to play out in observable reality. You observe someone else and you see them dying, and well, they're no longer talking. There's no spirit, no energy that goes somewhere else. There's it's clear that who they are is just disappeared. It's just gone. And so they're absolutely adamant, and most people are absolutely sure that the mind is dependent on the body. It's like a epiphenomenon caused by the makeup of the body somehow. And kind of like an emergent, one where there's emergent phenomenon, like it's like Plato describes it as a resonance. If you know anything about Plato's writing, he doesn't subscribe to this, but he portrays people as proposing the mind is like the resonance. When you play the strings of the harp, there's the melody, and when then there's a harmony, an octave or a fifth or whatever, you get melody, and so that's what the mind is. It's an emergent phenomenon. And Socrates goes on to sort of break this apart. I don't know how convincing he is, but that's Plato's idea. But these kind of theories are thrown out, but there's no doubt in their minds. I've talked to people like this, and there's no doubt in their minds that they're right. They admit that they don't know how it works, but it has to be that way. They're so sure about this because it seems like the default, because to them it's what's observable, because they and we have been inculcated, or we've been you can say indoctrinated into this framework that is based on impersonal material reality, atoms, things that exist and are indivisible in and of themselves. Of course, with the advent of quantum physics, we know that that's not quite true. There's a sense that things are very much dependent on observation, or there's no sense that things exist. It's hard to say that things exist independently of themselves anyway, so it gets quite complicated and appears to be not actually a very solid foundation. But what I want to say more, that before we, or without delving into arguments as to why this view is wrong and doesn't hold water, what the Mahasi Sayadaw points out is very important. Without going into arguments about why we can refute this or why we would say this is wrong, it's a real disappointing sort of philosophy, because it basically says that all of the truths that are perfectly verifiable, absolutely verifiable, and of great importance in this life, namely the truths that, simple truths, you do a good thing or you have wholesome qualities of mind and good things come of it. You cultivate your mind in a good way and good things come from it. You cultivate your mind in a bad way, bad things come from it. You can see this. This is a core part of the Buddha's teaching. It's a core aspect of reality. It's the most important part of reality. You know, the workings of body and mind, how the body and mind work together, are only of primary interest in terms of the ethical component. So the fact that the mind creates the intention for the body to move and the body gives feedback to the mind is not really important, because it's meaningless except for how the mind then interprets it as good, as bad, as me, as mine, and causes suffering. And so these good and bad deeds and this good and bad cultivation is exceptionally important. It's of utmost importance in this life. And then this philosophy basically says it's all meaningless. This reality, which is absolutely the framework of reality, and not just the framework, the most important or the only important part for us to ever have any need to understand in all the aspects of reality that exist, is just meaningless. Because when you die, the fool and the wise person both just go poof. And so it's internally inconsistent. It's inconsistent with, I mean, it's just it's like Deus ex machina. It's like this complete non sequitur that has nothing to do, no relationship with the momentary observation of reality, and completely flies in the face of this philosophy of what's important, and this important philosophy of being a good person, cultivating good qualities of mind, bettering yourself, you know. And more importantly, or of more practical importance, it leads to what we're seeing today: materialism, materialism, the acquisition or the obsession with materialism, the obsession with the here and now, not in the Buddhist sense, the here and now in terms of eat, drink, and be merry, because nothing really matters. In the end, we just die. YOLO, this YOLO, you only live once. YOLO. It's a real dangerous and horrible sort of. It sounds good, but it's a horrible philosophy because of not just what it does to you, but what it's doing to the world. You can see the results of this materialism, physicalism that leads to materialism. So even before we start to try to formulate arguments to show that there's no real basis for this view, it really just shouldn't resonate with anyone who has a sensitivity to good and evil, sensitivity to right and wrong, a sensitivity to reality, to the nature of ethical reality, not just the nature of how atoms work or how the four elements work, but how we work, and how goodness works and evil works and suffering works and happiness works. Because that just gets all thrown out the window when you become this impersonal, like this paragraph. I mean, this is different, but not categorically different from how scientists, material scientists describe the world, or can some material scientists or people who are invested in physicalism describe the world. And it's so devoid of goodness, evil, right, wrong, ethics, and more importantly, happiness and suffering. But it's not a very it's not capable of dealing with issues of or the theories about happiness and suffering and what causes happiness and what causes suffering.
This is then some of the teachings of Ajita, who held the view of annihilationism. This ideology may find ready acceptance by those who are reluctant to avoid evil or to do good, as it is postulated by this ideology that there is no life after death. It amounts to the admission that there is life before death. Then one may ask, what exists before death? The answer, according to their line of reasoning, could only be that it is the living self, atta, or a being, satta. Thus, although Ajita maintained that an individual is made up of the four great primaries, it must be said that for him, the self or a being exists. Because of this attachment to self, holders of this view argue that instead of wasting time doing good deeds for future existences, full opportunity should be taken of the present moment for the enjoyment of pleasures. The craving accompanied by this view that nothing remains after death is craving for non-existence. To summarize, craving that arises accompanied by the annihilationist view is craving for non-existence, vibhava tanha.
Yeah, so people who subscribe to this view take a simplistic. The criticism is that it's a simplistic or an intentional ignorance of the workings of karma. And by karma simply means the workings of how the ethical mind states lead to happiness and unethical mind states lead to suffering. It doesn't have to, I suppose. I mean, you could pay attention to it, pay attention to ethics, and certainly many people who subscribe to physicalism or this sort of philosophy, and we call annihilationism, I guess, do lead ethical lives. They subscribe to it, but the view prevents them from fully embracing it, in the sense that believing that it continues on forever, believe that this actually has some meaning in the long term. Because ultimately, how can you be dedicated to being ethical if in the end it doesn't have consequences? Like, you're about to die, why not just do whatever you want, throw ethics out the window? Because, well, not like I can suffer from it. I mean, it's not really true, and if you're very mindful, it's hard to. I mean, of course, you'll start to be ethical, but as you be more mindful, you become more invested in and more in tune with this mechanics of reality, and you're observing the way good deeds lead to good results, bad deeds lead to bad results. And so the idea that at death there is nothing is just that. It's just an idea. It has no bearing on reality. It has no resonance with you or experience, because you've never experienced it, and it's not part of this system that you're experiencing. And so acceptance of rebirth is very easy for someone who practices mindfulness. It's not a leap of faith. There's no need to ever take a leap. It just makes sense because you're describing reality. You're saying, yes, at the moment of death, everything that you've experienced is just basically continues. It is unimpeded. And okay, well, this is what I know exists. This is the reality that I'm aware of. I'm watching it happen here and now, moment after moment. And so rebirth isn't really a thing. It's not, I've said this before, my explanation of it is Buddhists don't believe in rebirth. They just don't believe in death. In other words, they don't believe that at the moment of death it's anything special. Death is at every moment. We born and die, born and die. It's experience after experience. And it just doesn't stop. It doesn't stop as long as there is more craving to lead to more becoming, which is, again, something you can see in the here and now. You can observe how craving leads to becoming. You can see, I mean, it's not even, you don't even need to be Buddhist. You want something, you take out a loan. You want something, you engage in some kind of agreement or some kind of entanglement. That's becoming. You hurt someone, you're entangled with them. You help someone, you're also entangled with them to some extent, potentially.
Say we've reached the end of the first hour. So now we'll move into the time for a bit of discussion. If there's any questions or anyone wants to say anything about the reading that we just read. If no one in the core group has any questions, we can move into the first question that we have asked on the YouTube chat. And when you are ready, please present it to Bhante. Thank you.
Thank you, Subitsu. Bhante, the first question that we have, the question is, I'm sorry if this question has been answered before, but what is the difference between mindfulness meditation and meditating on the breath? Or are they the same?
The problem with doing this for so long is that eventually all the questions have already been asked, but that's okay. That's not a problem. Don't be discouraged worrying that it's already been asked. We get mostly repeats, I would say, but that's fine. Many of the people here haven't heard the answer to most of the questions that are repeats anyway, so asking it is helpful for you because you've never heard the answer, but it can also be just as helpful for many people here, because not everyone here is an avid follower, watcher of all my videos and so on. So one way of answering your questions is that they are different. But one way of answering your question is that there are different kinds of breath meditation. So the Mahasi Sayadaw talks about the use of the stomach specifically because it's not breath meditation. Because breath meditation is samatha meditation. But that's one way of looking at it. It's not wrong. He's correct. I mean, this is the Mahasi Sayadaw. I'm never going to say, who would I be to say he's wrong, right? Not that he couldn't be, but how am I going to be the one to say he's wrong? And no, in this case, it's correct. And so I'm not trying to argue. That's one way of, and that's a very useful way of looking at it. But it can be helpful, especially for people who are convinced that breath meditation is the teaching of the Buddha, to just say, well, of course, I mean, this is obviously a kind of breath meditation. That's why you asked this question. It doesn't seem like it's not breath meditation, right? So in a way it is. 3 types of breath meditation. Ganananaya, which means the way of counting. So you can say in 1, out 1, in 2. And here you'd normally just focus on the place, where one place would be the nostril. And you count. Every time the breath goes in, you count 1. You can just count in breath 1, and then you don't count the out breath. 2, 3, counting like that. That's samatha meditation because it's conceptual. So the numbers are not real. You're just using the numbers as a means of focusing the mind on the numbers. And that's only samatha. It's not terribly useful beyond calming the mind, because numbers have no reality. They have no connection with momentary experience, and so they don't allow you to see impermanence, suffering, and non-self. In fact, they encourage, or they can encourage, the fostering of belief in permanent satisfaction and control, or stability, satisfaction, and control. Because the numbers are always the numbers, right? 1 is 1, 2 is 2, and it's very fixed and focused and stable. So it's very good for calming the mind, not good for seeing the 3 characteristics. The second type of breath meditation is called Anubandhana Naya. Anubandhana means following. So you follow the breath. Watch the breath going through the body. And then you watch the breath going out of the body. So you can say in, out. In, out is just one way of doing it. I mean, many people who practice meditation in modern times don't even use a mantra, which I would suggest is inferior, if not just outright wrong. But a mantra is a very important part of meditation, even in Buddhist texts from ancient times. So you should find a mantra. I mean, modern times you see a lot of there's very famous traditions, for example, out of Thailand, where, I mean, actually really specific to Thailand, that have become even famous internationally, where the breath goes in and you'll say bud, and the breath goes out and you'll say do. Bud, do. There's another one where they say samma arahang. Samma arahang. And some of you, I'm sure, have heard of these techniques. Some of you may not have heard of these techniques. For people in Sri Lanka, it's quite shocking to hear that this is actually the way people in Thailand practice, because it actually has no basis in the text and is a confusing or a mixing of different techniques. Why? Because this is in, that's correct. This is out, that's correct. It's conceptual. I'll get to that in a second, but it's correct. But this is not bud, and this is not do. Buddha is proper meditation when you're focusing on the Buddha. When you focus on the qualities of the Buddha and you say Buddha, Buddha or Buddho, Buddho. Buddho is just the nominative first person. The nominative singular of Buddha, meaning the subject. You can say Buddho or Buddha, it doesn't really matter. But when you mix it with the breath, you're suddenly doing two different things at once. You're thinking about the Buddha and you're thinking about the breath. And the mixing there is very interesting in terms of the results, the consequences. But this is a bit of a tangent anyway, but just as an example, there are many things that become complicated and really are not. Anyway, so I guess the most important thing about that is that it's important to use a mantra, but it's also important to use a mantra that describes the experience. So in-out is valid if you wanted to do that. But the issue here is that most likely, I'm not going to say 100%, but most likely saying in-out is focusing on a concept. Because nothing is going in. Or to be more clear, your experience is not actually of something going in. Something going in is conceptual. You conceive, oh, now the breath is going in. But why do you conceive that? Not because you experience, oh, look, this breath is going in. You experience sensation. And they arise and cease, but they arise and cease at each spot, each point. The sensation arises here, maybe a sensation arises here, but these sensations arise and cease, and you don't see that because you think, oh, it's moving. Moving is not what you experience. You experience sensation, right? So anubandhana is still samatha. You follow the breath in and out. This is still samatha meditation, most likely. Because when you say in, out, you're most likely thinking of something going in and something going, I mean, it's just what the words mean, and following is missing the actual experience. The third type of anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing, is sampujana-naya, which means through the method of contact. And this is vipassana. If you focus on the sensations here, or the sensation in the stomach, when the stomach rises and falls, you can call that anapanasati, because obviously the sensation of the stomach rising and falling is still the stomach, or is still the breath. You know, when the breath goes in, the stomach rises, that's breath, right? Part of the breath body. It's perfectly valid to call it anapanasati. It's also perfectly valid to say it's not anapanasati. It's just another way of looking at it. Why? Because there's another type of meditation, which is the meditation on the four elements. And the Visuddhimagga says that the four elements is the only meditation is the meditation that, it's not the only meditation, it's the meditation that a sukha vipassika uses to begin to practice vipassana. Or it's the very basis of vipassana. Let's simplify it. Why? Because it's the body. Body or rupa, kaya, whatever you want to call it, kaya in the four satipatthana, rupa in the five aggregates, is made up of the four elements. And so any one of the four elements works. If you note the heat in the body, saying hot, hot, cold, cold, that's rupa, that's kaya, that's the body. If you watch the tension in the body, it could be the tension in the limbs, the back, or it could be the tension in the stomach as the breath comes in. If you pay attention to that tension and you say whatever, expanding, inflating, or in English we have this strange word rising. It confuses people because it's not actually rising. It's just an idiom. It's just an English word for this expanding. Their languages use gonfle, degonfle, heben, sinken, pong, na, yup, na. Mostly have to do with this heben, sinken, I think is also, I don't know what that translates directly, but it sounds more like rising, falling. Anyway, expanding, contracting is what you're focusing, or tensing, releasing is the experience. But it's the words are not important. Which words you use are not important. Important is that you know that that's a name for this experience, because then the words are conceptual, but the experience, the name, or the object that carries that name is real. That's the distinction. When you say in, you're talking about the breath going in, and that's not real. When you say rising, you're talking about the tension of the body, and that's real. And so that's vipassana. So you can say it's not anapanasati, it's mindfulness of the body, or it's mindfulness of the four elements. Or you can say it is anapanasati, it's sampujana, the contact where the breath contacts at that point, where there is the expanding or the tensing based on the air that comes into the body. So I don't know if that is the answer you were looking for, but that's a fairly comprehensive explanation of how this practice fits into the framework of, fits in relation to anapanasati, relates to anapanasati.
Bhante, the next question we have. I have trouble staying awake while meditating, but I am confined to a wheelchair, so I cannot do walking meditation. If I keep my eyes open, it helps me stay present. Is this acceptable?
Well, there's different states of being confined to a wheelchair. If you're quadriplegic, paraplegic, or what, it's going to be different. But if you're paraplegic, you can still do certain activities, like the mindful prostration is one that I would recommend. There's a whole tradition outside of our tradition that does hand movements, focusing on the movement, and they have these very complex movements of the hand, and it's perfectly valid. I mean, I would say if they're actually noting, it would be more valid, but I don't think they do noting. But we do you can look up our mindful prostration, and it's just an example of using the hands instead of using the feet. You could also do, I don't know if you're paraplegic, you can maybe use your hands to propel the wheelchair, for example, and you could do that. Use your hands as a sort of a walking exercise. Some people in a wheelchair might even be able to move their feet, and so as they move the wheelchair, they can also move their feet, and note the movements of the feet. So lifting, placing, lifting, placing. I've even had children. I once taught kids, like we're talking public school children, Thai children. But in America, I taught a group of Thai children, but they're American Thai, so they're not really. Well, they're American kids basically, and so it was a challenge. And so rather than have them doing walking meditation, there's too many of them. And if you get them to walk, chaos, right? Because they're bumping into each other, they're looking at each other. Instead, I had them step. They all stood still, and I made it a kind of, used language that was kind of making it a little bit exciting, whatever. And I would have them say lifting, placing. They just lift their foot and put it back down. Lifting, placing, and did that sort of thing. So you can do that in a wheelchair if you're able to move your feet. Now, in the case where you're quadriplegic, there's not much you can do. I mean, you could, if you can still move your mouth, talk. I'm assuming, there are people who it's that bad. I guess it's probably not that bad for you, but in the case that it is that bad, you can move your mouth. Maybe you could do some kind of mouth meditation, moving your mouth, just some kind of movement as an exercise. It doesn't even matter what it is. Just a means of something repetitive to help you learn the relationship between the body and the mind. Watch how the mind initiates the body to move. Watch how the mind reacts when the body moves. So notice how the body arises and ceases. The feelings arise and cease. So there's any number of exercises that you could improvise out of it. Ultimately, I guess a good rule of thumb is then two things. One, so the rule of thumb is that you should try to do half and half. So normally that would be half walking followed by half sitting. If you can't do that, the rule is, a good rule of thumb is the first half should be with the eyes open, and if possible should involve some physical activity of some sort. So assuming you have some physical ability, even if it's just the ability to move your mouth, which I assume you probably have more than that, find some way to do something physical. But then I guess in the case of a person who absolutely had no movement except for their eyes, because at least you can open your eyes, right? So half with your eyes open and half with your eyes closed. I guess that would be the last resort. So why? Because it is important to have a period with the eyes closed. It's valuable. So cut it in half. Don't just say, I'm going to always have my eyes open. Do half and half. And the first half, if possible, again, also includes some physical activity of some sort.
Next question, Bhante. Should I aim to do everything mindfully? Shave, eat, drive, etc.?
Probably not. I think that the problem with having aims is they put you in the future. They set up expectations, desires, and disappointment, and lead to disappointment and frustration. They take you away from the present moment. And that should give you an idea of a better way. Give you a clue as to what would be better than aiming to be mindful all the time. But if it doesn't, the answer is you should aim to be mindful now. That's the best you can do. That's really all you can do. Anything beyond that is conceptual. Now, you can aim to, for example, put yourself in a position where you're able to do that more. The sort of meta practice can be, how can I change my life to make it easier to be mindful now all the time, right? But your focus should not be on being mindful all the time. It should be on being mindful now, in this moment, and then this moment. And then you slip and you fall and you're not, mentally you fall and you're not mindful. Let go of that. That's in the past. Be mindful now, and now, and now, and now, and now. Because that's the way you build the habit to eventually get to the point, potentially, where you are mindful all the time in everything you do. You at least get better at it. So you're more present when you act and when you think and when you speak. You're more mindful throughout it.
Bhante, the next question. Is it logical for us to stay as healthy as possible to increase the amount of time we spend in meditation?
No, not really. It doesn't really follow that the healthier you are, the better your meditation is going to be. Or more precisely, the more you focus or more energy you put into staying healthy, the better your meditation is going to be, for two reasons. One, because a lot of that energy could be better spent being mindful, right? It becomes an obsession, it becomes worrying, that leads to a lot of issues and problems. And two, being healthy is not always better for your practice in the first place. Being healthy can lead to negligence, can lead to a sense of laziness. Because when you're healthy, you feel good. Maybe you think, I better go for a run or do some physical exercise. You like the idea of physical, if you feel good when you exercise and so on. It can also lead to physical problems, like you exercise a lot and then you have a lot of pain when you sit in meditation. You feel tired when you sit in meditation, or you feel restless. I've had athletes come to meditate and they can't sit still. Too much energy, physical energy, and I had one woman who was just bouncing, she couldn't sit still. She was a professional athlete, I think. And being sick is one of the great catalysts for enlightenment. So it's not to say that health is the best, physical health is the best, and physical illness is the worst. What you can say is that preventable diseases, it's worth doing ordinary things to prevent them. Like, for example, wearing masks when there's contagious diseases around. This is a big thing in Asia. In so many Asian countries I've been to, wearing a mask is just something they've always done. And that's reasonable. It's not an impedance. It's not an impediment. Sorry, impediment to your practice, or it doesn't distract you. You just wear a mask. Getting vaccines. I mean, all this craziness talk about worry about the vaccines, fear of vaccines. Just get the vaccines. If you're worried that they're going to make you sick, you shouldn't be, because sickness is not a problem. Just get them, and apparently they do something good. Don't worry too much about how effective they are, or whether they might have side effects or something. Do what's normal. Do normal stuff. Don't be crazy. There's certain things like being careful about touching doorknobs, for example. There's some things that we don't think about that we probably should. Don't touch public doorknobs. Just don't touch them. Be mindful. It might sound obsessive, but it's actually such a big deal, because then you'll get sick. It's one of the most common ways that people get sick, as an example, touching public things that other people have touched. Be mindful about what you touch. Be mindful that after you've touched something, you don't then go and scratch your nose or lick your fingers or eat with your hands or something like that. So, I mean, ordinary things, it's certainly valid. And there's other reasons as well, like not just for mindfulness. You have a job, and if you get sick, that's a problem. So, I mean, mindfulness can help you avoid sickness, which is practically useful for in a worldly sense. But, mindfulness also benefits from general good health. So over the long term, you do want to put some thought into staying healthy. Like cancer would be a great opportunity to be mindful, but for most people, it probably wouldn't be that ultimately effective, because they die before. I mean, cancer you don't always die from it, but a disease like that, it's quite common for people to die from it before they are able to become enlightened. So part of the kind of thing you want to be a little bit cognizant of, and don't sit next to an X-ray machine or something like that, whatever causes extreme cancer. But you don't want to be obsessed either, because, well, we're all going to get old, sick, and die, and cancer is the last thing if you live long enough, it's cancer, apparently. So we're all going to get it if we live long enough. So don't be obsessed with trying to stay healthy or avoid any kind of illness. It's not great practice. It's just a good example of how you should do what's reasonable.
The next question, Bhante. How much time should I spend meditating relative to how much time I should spend learning Buddhism from books and online?
I can't put a number on that. I mean, what would it mean to put a number on that? But it's a good question in that it's correct to have that sense that there should be a relationship. You should do some studying. And the more meditation you practice, the more studying you should do, I think it's not really accurate, but practically speaking, it's pretty accurate. I mean, you can't just do meditation almost. I mean, almost means you have to learn how to meditate and learn basic theory behind meditation. Otherwise, just going off to meditate is just random, right? Maybe you practice all wrong. Most likely you practice all wrong if you don't have a good teacher, good technique. And even better, have regular interactions with your teacher, with a teacher, someone who can guide you, someone who can point out what you're doing wrong, correct you, and just someone who you're accountable to. And that's teaching, that's learning. So it's not from a book, but you learn from a teacher. You just learn something that's important for you that day. Like, hey, you're not paying attention to this. That's learning. And it's much better than book learning because it's directed to your exact problem. So without that, most people are just going to get lost. And so the more you practice, it's fair to say the more learning you need for most people, practically speaking. You don't want to just do lots and lots of practice without any checking in with a teacher, let alone any theoretical knowledge from books. But of course, on the other hand, you don't want to say, I'll do lots and lots of study and that will help me with what little meditation I do. It won't. The more studying, even watching Dhamma talks, listening to Dhamma talks on the internet, if you listen to hours and hours of Dhamma talks thinking this will help what little meditation I do, it won't. Because the act of listening to the Dhamma talks is not likely mindful, not likely a meditation. It can be if you're mindful of the sound of the voice. Like right now, if you're listening to the sound of my voice and you say, hearing, that can be the development of mindfulness. Most likely it's not. Most likely you're considering, doubting, wondering, analyzing, interpreting, lots of mental activity, and those are all habit forming. So over time, those become your habit, and they can actually make it more difficult to practice if there's too much of it. Especially if it's reading, if you read vast tracts of books, reading is a real disruption to concentration. But yeah, there should be a relationship, and it's up to you to figure out what a healthy relationship for you is, but be careful that you don't start studying too much or just go off and practice and neglect any kind of feedback from a teacher or at worst from the Buddha's teachings in books. It's not bad. Of course, the Buddha's teachings everyone should study and read, but the problem with books is that they're not directed to you particularly, so there's a disadvantage there that you're just reading everything. If you're just going by books, you have to read everything in the hopes that some of it is applicable to your specific situation here and now, when a lot of it isn't as pertinent to your situation.
The next question, Bhante. My mind races and I feel many painful thoughts. My doctor suggested mindful meditation to observe the thoughts. Will it help me? It is a challenge.
It is a challenge. Never forget that mindfulness is a challenge. People come into mindfulness in the wrong way. You hear about meditation and you immediately think, oh, something that relaxes me, something that will give me a break, something that's kind of like a vacation or a calming exercise. That's not what mindfulness is. Mindfulness should not be understood as that or in that way. Mindfulness is a training. In fact, the Buddha's teaching is a training. The Buddha used the word training. Sikha is the word the Buddha used as a core word to describe his course of practice, his method, his instruction to his students. He taught people the Disika, the three trainings: the training in ethics, the training in concentration, and the training in wisdom. These are trainings. Now, what do we know about trainings? Trainings are, by their very nature, on purpose, intentionally challenges. Intentionally challenges. Let that sink in. Not, oh, I would practice meditation, but it's too challenging. Or, oh, I like this, but it's really challenging. As though that's a bad thing. Or as that should surprise you. That surprises you. Right? And it shouldn't surprise you. You should if you understand mindfulness correctly as a training, and you understand the challenge is the reason why it's valuable, just as with any training. If you train in weightlifting, the very simplest, sort of incredibly simplistic sort of training, add more weight. How do you improve? You don't take weight off and make it easier. You don't leave the weight the same and let it get easier and easier. When it starts to get easier, you better quickly make it more challenging. Add more weight. Sports. Let's take tennis. I don't know much about tennis, but I did learn tennis once. I took a lesson in tennis, and they give you drills. You practice something, and then you practice something, I assume, a little bit more difficult. And then, you work on more complicated tennis routines, etc., etc. Training in anything. Training in typing, right? When we learned how to touch type in the 80s. Alfalfa salad. Simple. It's all on the home row. Alfalfa salad. And then you start to add more complexity. Challenging. Oh no, don't do that. It's too challenging. Why are you making it more challenging? This is challenging. I don't want that. That would be ridiculous to say or to think that sort of thing. The challenge is important. It's why it's valuable. So that doesn't answer your question, but let's address that and remind everyone, all of us, that it's good that it's a challenge. Otherwise, it wouldn't be of much use. Okay. Your issue. The most important thing about what you said that we have to address is where you say you have painful thoughts. And many of you have heard me address this issue. There's no such thing as a painful thought. You have to be able to separate the thoughts from the pain. The pain is the disliking of the thoughts. The pain is the disliking of something related to the thought. It can even be the headache that comes from worrying about the thoughts. But the thoughts themselves are just thoughts. Right? My mind races. In and of itself is not a big deal. But practically speaking, it's a huge deal. Why? Not because of the racing. It's a big deal because you don't like that it races. Maybe you even worry that it races. Maybe you're afraid of what it means that your mind races. Maybe you feel bad about yourself, some kind of low self-esteem because your mind races. There are lots of things that can come. But all of these are not the thinking itself. They're not the mind racing. What they are is the cause for the mind to continue racing. And they're the food, the nourishment for the mind racing. The mind races, and then you react to that. You don't like it, you worry about it, and so you try to do something You try to force yourself to calm down, or you distract yourself, or you listen to music, or you play games, or you go talk to people, you go for a run. You find a way to escape, to run away from it. What that does is it increases your breath, let's say, surrounding the mind racing. And with the increase in stress, what happens is the mind races more. There's an excitement and there's more racing. If you start to see the racing as just racing, without trying to fix it, without trying to slow it down, without trying to change it or avoid it or run away from it, you're no longer feeding it. You're no longer disliking it. You're no longer stressing about the stress. You're no longer in the feedback loop, which perpetuates a racing mind. And so indirectly, by not trying to fix the racing mind, you fix the problem, which was not the racing mind actually at all. The racing mind is, if anything, just a symptom. The problem is the disliking of many things, the worry, the fear, the state of mind. This is the biggest problem. So stop thinking of them as painful thoughts. They're just thoughts. Look at the pain and look at the thoughts and try to learn to be mindful of each independently, even though they're very connected. Of course, they're connected. One causes the other, but they don't. It's not just one way. One causes the other, and the other turns around and feeds back into the cause in the first place. It's more complicated than just these thoughts cause me pain. The thoughts don't actually have to cause you pain at all. If you see the thoughts just as thoughts, it stops there. So I don't know if you've read our booklet on how to meditate. It's a good way to learn how to just see the thoughts as thoughts and the pain as pain. Disliking. Painful thoughts means there's thoughts and then disliking. So the disliking is just disliking, or it can be fear, it can be worry, it can be stress, it can be depression, sadness, it can be lots of things. Painful thoughts can often be sadness. Any of those things, noting them, staying with them, facing them, without trying to fix, change, or get rid of them. Stay with them until they do go away. And you've stopped feeding them. You've stopped creating this feedback loop. With practice over time, if you're vigilant, if you have contact with a teacher, we have an at-home meditation course. You could try doing that. Over time, you will see improvement. Absolutely. How many people? Everyone. Anyone who sticks with it. There are the odd person who doesn't stick with it, gives up, or is just has too hard of a time, or is not in the right place. But anyone who sticks with it doesn't come away saying, yeah, that was useless. Nobody comes away wondering why they did that or feeling like it was a waste of time. Do it. Really, if you really do it, you can't help but see immediate results. Immediate small results. You'll see little tiny results. It's not an immediate thing. It's not something you can do for a week and be cured. You can do it for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks at most and realize that this is the cure. And you do it for 3 more weeks or 6 more weeks and you realize, oh, it's a deeper problem than I thought. And yes, this is the cure, but it's going to take a lot longer than I thought. It's much, much deeper than we realize. And it's not something you can just fix. Most of our solutions are quick fixes. You take a drug that fixes it. You take alcohol or recreational drugs. You seek diversion with entertainment or interaction with other people or this kind of thing. And these are all quick fixes. There is no quick fix. This is a deep-seated problem that follows us life after life. And it requires either a lot of time or a lot of dedication. Most people, it's somewhere in between dedication and time.
The next question, Bhante. Whenever my anxiety happens, My chest hurts so bad I cannot practice breathing and mindfulness. What to do during that time? How to meditate?
It's quite simple. I don't know if you've read our booklet on how to meditate, or I don't know if you've done our at-home course. If you've read the book, next step is do the at-home course. You can ask these questions then, and you'll get great answers. I mean, asking it now is fine, of course, as well. Everyone else gets to hear the answer as well. So, when your chest hurts, there's absolutely no reason to note anything else. You've got something quite obvious that you should be noting, and that's the chest hurting. I mean, it's the hurt, the pain. Pain is not actually the chest hurting, it's just pain. Chest is just superfluous. It's not meaningful. There is the pain has arisen. It's present, your mind is aware of it. The problem is that when your mind is aware of it without mindfulness, the next moment is disliking of it. And in this case, most likely more anxiety. This is a good example of the feedback loop. And anxiety is such a culprit of the feedback loop. Anxiety leads to physical tension. Tension leads to anxiety. You get worried about the results of being worried. Oh, I'm so worried, but you're not worried. You're just feeling tense as a result of being worried. And so then you get more worried, more anxious. This is how panic attacks occur. Why panic attacks are such a thing is because it's such a feedback loop. Anxiety, physical manifestation, getting anxious about that, more anxiety, more physical manifestations. People even pass out, they hyperventilate. It's a real problem. But none of it's a problem. The anxiety isn't the problem. The physical manifestations aren't a problem. The problem is you see it as a problem. And that makes you more anxious and leads to more physical manifestations. But if you see the anxiety as just anxiety, well, it arises and ceases. There's nothing to be anxious about. It's just anxiety. I'm not anxious about the anxiety. I just see it as anxiety. The pain in the chest in your example, or tension for other people, probably tension for you as well. These are not a problem either. They don't have any consequences. They're just things that arise and cease. Pain is pain. Tension is tension. So you face the pain. You say pain, pain. Read the booklet. It will explain a little bit in detail about this. And just say pain, pain, slowly, patiently, until the pain goes away. Then you can go back to noting the body, following the breath. It's not something you're going to fix overnight, but again, it's a training. Once you get good at it, you absolutely will begin to fix it. Again, it takes time, but you'll see. You won't have any doubt. You won't be skeptical and think, "Oh, he's just telling me that it's not actually a real fix," because he just says it takes a long time. You'll see for yourself it is working. And you won't have to believe me when I say over time it's going to fix the problem. Because you'll see it fixing the problem slowly over time.
Bhante, the next question. Is it possible to be mindful of one's visual field the same way one can be mindful and observant of hearing?
It's more difficult for sure, but yes, you can note seeing. I mean, it's most obvious most apparent when people do intensive practice. During an intensive practice, your mind becomes very sharp and strong and focused, and you are able to perceive the arising of seeing and the cessation of seeing. It's not easy otherwise. It's why we do most of our practice with the eyes closed, or sitting practice with the eyes closed. It's just very difficult. How it works practically is during the time that your eyes are closed, you'll still see things. Or most people will still see things. So you might see lights or colors or pictures. And you can then approach that and be mindful of that. Say seeing, or say seeing until it goes away. And that starts to teach you or move you towards the ability to note visual stimuli. But even practically, even in daily life, you can note when you see something particularly attractive or particularly distracting. Like maybe you're doing walking meditation and you see a cat or a dog. You can stop and note seeing, just focused on the dog or the cat, because it's something very striking and most likely going to give rise to emotions. You see a cute animal and you like it, you like what you see. But if you learn to just say seeing, you can free yourself from that. You can keep your mind objective, calm, clear, and not distracted, not yearning, not needing or yearning for more. Same goes when you see people. It might be someone you like, someone you don't like, someone you're attracted to, someone you're repulsed by. That's a good example of where seeing is most obviously practically valuable. And you'll see that working from time to time, that when you say seeing, then the liking or disliking doesn't arise.
Bhante, the next question. Sometimes I feel that my effort lessens during the practice. It's harder to feel so much motivation and clarity for the practice, and I feel as if my willpower, for example, being mindful during meditation, also decreases. Do you have any advice in regard to the effort?
Yeah, don't emphasize effort. Don't focus or worry about effort or lack of effort. Effort is just one of the 5 faculties. People often do this. They fixate on effort because I think it's because it's how you would approach a task in worldly life. You're given a task, well, you just gotta push through it. Effort is the forefront. Use effort to complete your tasks. It's not how meditation or mindfulness works. With mindfulness is the leader. Mindfulness is the key. So if the meditation practice or the qualities of mind are like the engine or a car, a vehicle, mindfulness is the key. Mindfulness is the one you have to use to initiate all the rest. So in this case, you have to dispel the notion that you should somehow have motivation or willpower. These are not really things that you should try to cultivate. You shouldn't practice because you're motivated to practice. It's a problem. It's a misconception that people have. They feel like you should have to want to meditate, and it's not really possible. Because meditation is not something you can crave, right? When they say they want to meditate, they're just comparing it to other things that they want. Like I want to dance, or I want to go to a party, or I want to eat good food, or I want romance, or I want this, or I want that. They just compare it with that and they say, I just don't have the will, the desire to do it. So how do you do it? So, and get discouraged when they don't feel that same zest or zeal or desire. You don't practice mindfulness because you want to do it. You practice mindfulness because you know that you should do it, that it's right to do it. Not everything we do is out of desire, is out of ambition or zest, zeal. You practice mindfulness because you see and you appreciate the value of it. And that comes in the beginning because you're suffering. You've never practiced mindfulness. You don't know if it works, but you're suffering or you have a problem, or you see the problem, or not even suffering, you see the potential for suffering. You see, I'm not prepared for all this suffering that other people have. That's a good reason for people to start. Hard to see that. Most people don't start, like the Buddhist, the Bodhisattva started because of that. He saw other people sick and old and dying and dead. And he said, I'm not ready for that. I'm not suffering now, but all of those things are in my future, and I'm not ready for that. And so he began to practice, not because he wanted, but because he saw the need. And so with mindfulness, now that we have the Buddha's teaching and we don't have to go through all the wrong practices that the Bodhisattva did, we try mindfulness, and we try it because we've heard that it can be an answer to these issues, to these problems. And then once you start to practice, you see that it works, you know that it's the answer, and as a result of knowing that it's going to fix your problems, you continue to practice. You don't need desire to practice, per se. It's not really desire, even though we sometimes call it, like we say, chanda or Dhammacakkappavattana or that sort of thing. It's just a word. It's not actual desire. It's just you have wisdom. You have experience. You know that this is valuable. You know that the Dhamma is right. You know that it's true. And you really do have a sense of great zeal for it, but as a result of seeing that it works. And so focus on that. Don't focus on trying to convince yourself to practice or motivate yourself to practice. Focus on the lack of motivation. Focus on the lack of effort, because there's something there. There's maybe craving or desire to stop. Laziness is often just craving for the pleasure of taking a break or resting. And that's interesting. That's why we practice, to see that, to see the mind whine and complain and wish it was doing something else. Try and focus on that. If you pay attention to it and see it more clearly, you'll see that it was only based on delusion. It was based on ignorance. It was based on the lack of clarity that you give rise to this craving or this yearning or this need. Stop. Or it can manifest in terms of aversion. You think about meditating and you just feel repulsed. Oh, I have to do that again. Well, that's interesting. That's a good reason to do it. So you can pay attention to that, because that's dangerous. That should really make you think, oh, I really do have to meditate, because look at me, I have this aversion in me, this anger, this disliking, which is a real problem. Because in the future, this is going to pop up and going to cause great problems for me in my life. So when you're mindful, you can face that, say disliking. Disliking the meditation is a good object of meditation. These sorts of things. Remember, it's meant to be a challenge. That's the whole point.
Bhante, the last question we have time for today. If I meditate for an hour a day, can I reasonably expect to notice and hence not act upon my thoughts?
Well, that's not really what you should be focused on. You shouldn't be focused on not acting on your thoughts. You shouldn't be focused on some kind of well, you shouldn't be focused on that first and foremost anyway. Your goal is not to change anything or fix anything or prevent, fix or change anything. Even to prevent, let's say, your goal should not be the preventing. Your goal should very simply be the seeing. Seeing is the goal of mindfulness. This is why we call it satipatthana vipassana. Satipatthana refers to the practice of mindfulness. It's the establishing of mindfulness. We use the word patana or upatana because that's what mindfulness does. It's like when you shoot a gun or you cut with a knife. A knife has the effect of cutting. That's what knives do. Mindfulness has the effect of establishing. That's why we use the word satipatthana, because you're establishing with mindfulness, just like you're cutting with a knife or you're shooting a gun. You're establishing the mind with mindfulness. Mindfulness establishes the mind into the object, like a pillar. The ordinary mind is like a gourd, a hollow gourd, or you could say a beach ball. In modern times, you think of a beach ball floating on the ocean. A beach ball just bobs and weaves and goes everywhere with the current. It has no fixed nature. That's the ordinary mind. The mindful mind is like a pillar. Even though it might be in deep water, if it's stuck into the seabed, it won't go anywhere. This is what mindfulness is. So mindfulness is the practice. When you say to yourself, for example, seeing, or and noting whatever arises in the present moment, this is the establishing of mindfulness for the purpose of seeing clearly. And that's it. You should just stop there. Don't think, I'm going to stop my mind from reacting. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to change. I'm going to fix. Absolutely, all of that will happen. But your focus should be on seeing. And so why I was kind of negative about what you said is not that is in and of itself not the goal, but it's more of the long-term effect. And it's a gradual and non-linear effect, meaning it's not like you're just going to see less and less and less reacting. You're going to notice moments where you didn't react, where it worked. You can say, oh, I was so mindful that I just didn't react. I didn't react when normally I would have. But then you'll slip and you'll be unmindful and it will come back. And so you're discouraged. Sometimes people are discouraged. They'll say, oh, it only was temporary and now I'm reacting again. It's complicated. So if you practice an hour a day, you should be able to notice times where you don't react, right? Where you don't react with greed, where you don't react with anger or delusion. And the more you practice, the more you should see that. The less reactions you should see. And so I guess if your question is just that, is it effective? Is it enough to practice an hour a day? The answer is probably enough to see some change. Right? So if that's all you're asking, then yes, that's true. But if the rest of the day, outside of that hour, you're not very mindful, the effects might be very difficult to see. So I would add one more thing, and I would say, if your question were, if I practice 1 hour a day of formal mindfulness, doing half in the morning and half in the evening, and throughout the day, whenever I can, I'm taking time to apply mindfulness through the 4 postures of walking, standing, sitting, and lying, the movements of the body, mindful of the hindrances, mindful of the senses, as best I can. It doesn't mean always, but it means trying. Will I see an effect? Will I notice that I react less, or even not at all sometimes, when normally I would have reacted very negatively? The answer is, of course, yes. Absolutely, you will see some benefit. I guess the other thing I would say, just in closing, is that even that result isn't the goal. I mean, it isn't enough. If that's all you hope to get out of meditation, it's probably going to be disappointing, because as soon as you stop meditating, it's just going to all come back again, right? If you were to ever stop, it's just kind of a perpetual thing. But the goal is one step deeper. It's that once you stop reacting, you're able to see more clearly that things are not worth reacting to. And over time, it becomes a sort of its own feedback loop, where it gets stronger and stronger until the clarity is so powerful that your mind lets go. Your mind actually lets go, not just by not reacting to things, but lets go of everything. And there's experience of cessation as a result, but the important thing is that the mind really just said, nothing is worth clinging to. Right? Just this perspective where the mind is just at that moment free from any desire for anything. I mean, just completely reject clinging of it to anything. And as a result, enters into cessation. And that is the goal. That is called the path and fruition and nibbana. So, not that the answer to your question is no, but maybe a little more nuanced than simply saying, I practice an hour a day, will I succeed in meditation?
We have passed the second hour, so we will conclude our session there. I am told that we had upwards of 58 viewers on YouTube today and 31 on Discord. So that's great to see. Thank you, Bhante, so much for answering people's questions, for your time and explanations.
Sadhu, thank you all. Yeah, we have new people on Discord. That's great to see. Old people coming back as well. And a large group on YouTube is great to hear as well. Just think how much goodness we created on this occasion. Each and every one of us here today. Think of the goodness, not just your own goodness. What I mean is think of all the other people's goodness. It was good for you to come here. Why? Because you thought about the Dhamma, maybe you can practice the Dhamma, maybe you were mindful. Hopefully you were mindful at some points, even just mindful that you're sitting here. But at the very least, you learned about mindfulness, you learned about Buddhism. We studied the very first discourse of the Buddha, which was the turning of the wheel of Dhamma, which is the whole basis on which the whole of Buddhism is founded. We studied a piece of that today. A very small piece, but we studied it. So many types of goodness, even just the goodness of being kind and thoughtful and considerate to each other in terms of the way we approach these sessions, in terms of coming together in harmony. Just think of all that goodness besides your own goodness, all coming together, because you can appreciate that. You can amplify your own goodness by appreciating everybody else's goodness as well. So I express my appreciation, and this is why we say sadhu. Sadhu is the appreciation of goodness. Appreciate the goodness that everyone has performed on this occasion. And by appreciating that, we do another good deed. That appreciation is also a wholesome deed because it affirms in our minds, this was indeed good. This, we see this, we experience this as something that has consequences. It's not nothing. It's not just a drop in the ocean that just disappears. It's a seed that we plant that germinates and brings fruit. And we plant more seeds we care for those seeds and we cultivate those seeds, and good things will come. So all of the goodness that has been performed on this occasion and all the good deeds that you've done in this life and in past lives, along with the greatness of the Buddha, the greatness of the Dhamma, the greatness of the Sangha, may all of this goodness and greatness protect all of you. Protect everyone here to be free from suffering, free from pain, free from enmity, free from danger, free from sickness. May you all live healthy, happy, long lives with the strength to face whatever challenges come your way. May you be dedicated to the path of the Buddha, for the understanding of reality as it is, by practicing mindfulness and cultivating clarity of mind, to see clearly the three characteristics, the nature of reality, that no arisen thing is worth clinging to whatsoever. May you find happiness in this life, happiness in the next life, and the highest happiness that there is, for the path, fruition, and nibbana. Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.